Is there any questions or comments on your meditation? Anything I can do for you in that respect? No? Okay. Then we can move on to our talk. What I would like to talk about today is one of the great disciples of the Buddha, who is often not so well known. You may know that there are some 80 great disciples called Mahasavaka in 4 categories: monks, nuns, and male and female lay practitioners, and each one of them excels in one particular area. Would you know who is the outstanding disciple in the quality of Metta among the female lay disciples? She was holding the title of the foremost female lay practitioners as regards loving kindness, metta, unconditional goodwill, the friendliness to all beings without judgment, non-judgmental, unconditional goodwill to all beings, loving kindness. And she was the foremost female lay practitioner practicing that. Does anyone know? Aha, you have to work on your Mahasavaka knowledge. Good, yeah. So it is Samavati, Queen Samavati. She was one of the wives of King Udena in Kosambi. When you have been on pilgrimage, you may have made it to Kosambi. It's not so commonly on the route, but if you manage, it's a very interesting place to go to. And it's one of the great Shakespearean epic dramas which happened at that time. The story of Samavati is very fascinating. She started off coming from a very rich family, but in a major famine, even her very rich father became impoverished and he had to leave his home, and he went to Kosambi hoping to meet one of his old friends who is also from a wealthy banker's family. However, when they arrived in Kosambi, due to the hardships of the famines, they were very emaciated, very weak, and they hardly managed to keep on going. So Samavati, as a daughter, actually went out and she went to a public food distribution, which she often had in ancient India, and she got some food for her parents. So she went there and she asked for 3 portions of food. And the food distributor didn't really like it, but because she was a friendly young girl, he gave her 3 portions. However, unfortunately, when her father was eating that, because he was so weak, it knocked him out and he basically died. So the next day she went and she asked only for 2 portions of food at the public food distribution for her mother and herself. And she went back, and then her mother, similar, she was so weak and now suddenly eating again, and then also the grief about her hardship, and then the loss of her husband, who she was very attached to and very fond of. So the next day her mother died. So on the 3rd day she went there and she asked only for 1 portion. And the food distributor made a cynical remark. And he said, have you finally understood the capacity of your stomach? But already then, when she was a young girl, she had from her past life paramis. She had great compassion, kindness, and she didn't give any retaliating answer. She just calmly explained that the first day she asked for 3 of them, then her father died, she only needed 2 portions, and now her mother died and she's a completely abandoned orphan, and she needs only 1 portion of food. In order to reach a position of a Mahasavaka, you can't do that in one life. Now the practice has to extend over many lifetimes of accumulating paramis. And as she had done that already as a young girl, she had this exceptionally strong quality of metta. And the food distributor was a little bit embarrassed that he had completely misunderstood her intention. He thought she was just filling up herself with 3 portions. And he was so impressed by her calm demeanor, by her equipoise, by her friendliness, even on a cynical remark, And he was so fond of her that he suggested that he would adopt her. And as she didn't have any parents anymore, she didn't have anyone in Kosambi she knew, and she was destitute anyhow, and she happily agreed to that. So once she lived in her new stepfather's and stepmother's home, being a very kind and a loving person, she immediately felt the debt of gratitude to him, and she wanted to help out. And you can imagine food distribution in ancient India at a time of famine. There was a huge commotion. Often people would get into arguments, they would even get into strife, and they would be fighting. And she recognized it, and immediately she set out helping her new stepfather in organizing that. And due to her organizational skills, she also had developed the power of wisdom, of mindfulness, but even more so due to her natural metta, she managed in a couple of weeks to organize and reorganize the whole system there. And it became very orderly, it became very much based on kindness, on empathy, and simply her presence. And if you have experienced some of the great Ajahns, I have just been in the monastery of Luang Por Ban, who died in 1987, I think, and late 80s. But even nowadays you can feel his influence in the monastery, very uplifting. And when he was alive, one of the Kuba Ajahns who trained under him, he said that just being in his monastery, everyone felt happy. Just being in his presence, the people relaxed. They often had to live, many monks in one kuti, but there was no argument, there was no strife, because the power of the loving kindness of Luang Por Van created this harmony and concord. So similar, Samavati succeeded in having the food distribution orderly. She made sure that everyone would get something. And even the weak ones or the old ones, they wouldn't have to fight to get to the top, because she would make sure that there's enough that everyone gets his portion. Even if it goes late into night, she would continue working to make sure that they don't have to fight, they get all fed. And one day, one of the ministers of the king was touring the city, looking after the kingdom, that everything is running smoothly. And one headache in his mind was his food distribution, because there was always commotion, there were always problems. So he was very surprised, and he walked past, and they were all standing in line. They had a smile on their face. It was all done with kindness and empathy. It was all done with compassion. Even the poor and the sick and the old and the weak, even the ones of the low caste, everyone would get their fair share. It was calm, it was peaceful. He was very surprised, and he went to the food distributor and he inquired, how is this possible? How did you manage to do that? And the food distributor was honest enough to admit, isn't really my achievement, I have to tell you, Minister. It is actually my new stepdaughter. And she is so kind, so mindful, and she managed to organize it all peacefully. So the minister wanted to see her, and the moment he saw her, and he also became incredibly fond of her. And some days later he went back and he told him that he would like to adopt that little girl. So the food distributor was already very attached to her, but in the end he felt that this would give her a unique chance to grow up in one of the leading families of the whole kingdom, one of the chief ministers of the king. And reluctantly and with sadness in his heart, he spoke to Samavati, but he suggested that she rather goes there, because then she can really prosper. So she had also good qualities in terms of being able to let go, and she was happy to move into the new house. And from that time on, she lived in one of the leading families of the kingdom. She got all the training and the education which was given to children in rich leading families. And one day it happened that the king came to visit their chief minister. And you can probably already imagine what happened. He got to see Samavati, and he was immediately tremendously fond of her. And it's one of the effects of loving kindness, one of the benefits of loving kindness. You're dear to human beings, you're dear to non-human beings. The devas protect you. Even animals like you. But in the case of the king, who was having quite strong desire and passion in being an unrestricted absolute monarch, when he saw her, he fell into worldly love with her, and he didn't ask to adopt her, but he asked to marry her. So first the chief minister had become so fond of her that he refused. But those days it's not a smart idea to refuse an absolute king. And he was immediately removed from his post. Even his house was sealed, he couldn't re-enter. When Samavati saw that, she immediately went to her stepfather and she told him, "It's okay, I can marry the king. I don't want to see you suffer." So in a short time, her splendid marriage as one of the chief queens of the king was arranged. So she came into the palace. Now she was one of the chief queens of the whole country. So you can see the roller coaster of life, the worldly dhammas. She started in a rich banker family. She got completely impoverished. She ended up starving, becoming an abandoned orphan, and then working her way up, and now again being one of the chief queens of the king, of one of the powerful kingdoms in ancient India at the time of the Buddha. However, the situation wasn't easy because there were two other chief queens. The one was quite attractive, very beautiful, but apparently intellectually and from her other qualities not so outstanding. The second one was even more beautiful, outrageously beautiful, but with a very dark, evil heart, Ma Gandhiya, and she was number 3 now. And on top of that, there were 500 other women. Because in those days, some of the kings had heaps of official wives. But with loving kindness, she moved into that situation. And after a short while, the king also became extremely fond of her, which aroused the jealousy of chief queen number 2, Ma Gandhiya, the beautiful but evil one. I can't really go into all the details, but there were many ploys and many schemes how Ma Gandhiya tried to get rid of Samavati. After some time, Samavati actually came into contact with the Dhamma. That is another of the great disciples. Have you heard of her? She was actually the role model for female lay disciples. In each category, there's actually a twofold role model, which is very good to know, because that is the ones you should emulate, to copy, to follow their lead. Many people would know the role models for monks. Who are the top monks, which any monk should aspire to be similar to, and to practice so that they can become similar to them? Do you know? Vallabhasariputta Moggallana, no, of course, no, that is a pair of chief disciples. Many people also still know the female models for the nuns. You know? What is it? Female chief disciples of the Buddha for nuns. Yeah, Khema and Upalavanna. And very similar like the monks. One is foremost in wisdom, the other in psychic powers. Do you know the laymen? The two? Anatta Pindika, he is a great disciple, but he is not a role model. You can do even better than him. He bought the Jetavana by covering the ground with money. But the chief disciples, the role models for male lay disciples, were two other ones. Chitta Gahapati and Alava Gahataka. These are the two role models for male lay disciples. It's really important to know that, because I don't see so many monks or nuns here. The only one is sitting in front of you. And if you try, for example, if you're a female lay disciple and you try to practice like Sariputta Moggallana, it doesn't really make sense. Because your character is different, your gender is different, and your station in life is different. So even the same, if a male lay disciple tries to practice like Sister Upalavanna, again the wrong category. So what is the leading role models for the female lay disciples? Kujuttara, exactly. Is that Google? Aha. Don't you have a sign outside that you can't use your mobile devices? This is tracking it. What is correct? Ne? It is Kujuttara and it is Uttaranandamata. The second one was the foremost in doing jhanas, as a lay disciple even. She was a non-returner. Kujuttara was also a non-returner. That is, I think, one reason that Anathapindika didn't make it. I think all four of them are actually non-returners. It's a very high standard to be the standard of the lay disciple. The Kujuttara was also in the harem, but Kujuttara means hunchbacked. That's the meaning of that name. So she was not beautiful. So the king wasn't interested in her. She was only a servant. But that meant she was the only one who was really free. Now all these wives, although they were queens and they were very pampered, they lived in a kind of golden cage. They couldn't just go out. On the other hand, Kujuttara, because she was not attractive to the king, she had the freedom. She could just go out. And her job was to buy flowers for the ladies in the harem. And she wasn't quite honest. She got 10 gold coins every day for all these tremendous flowers for the whole palace. And she would buy flowers for 5 gold coins, and 5 gold coins she would keep. So one day she was going out to buy her flowers, and on the way she saw the Buddha preaching and teaching the Dhamma in one of the monasteries which were offered there. And she thought, no, why not going in? Maybe I can learn something. So she went in, she listened to the Buddha, and while she was sitting there, the Buddha recognized this person has the ability to see the Dhamma, and she became a stream enter, right on that spot listening to the first Dhamma discussions. What was the first result? After that, now as a stream enter, she had to buy the flowers. So what would she do? What is the quality of a stream enterer? Yeah, they wouldn't break the pious precepts, certainly not easily. So she bought flowers for 10 gold coins. The result is there were twice as many flowers in the palace. And all the queens were surprised, what's going on there? So Queen Samavati called her servant and asked her. So he asked her, what is the reason? Suddenly we have twice as many flowers. What does a stream enterer do in that situation? Speak the truth. No? And actually, the suttas don't say clearly that it's absolutely impossible under all circumstances for a stream enterer to ever break the precepts. But they do say it is impossible for them to conceal it. So maybe in some extreme situations it may happen, but then they are definitely incapable of concealing it. So when she was asked there, she just confessed it all straight away. But she was obviously lucky. She had good karma because her queen is a foremost Metta practitioner. And so she straight away forgave her. But she became very interested in that teaching. She had gone there, she listened once to the Buddha, and straight away she stopped embezzling the money, and straight away she confessed that she took the money all these years. So she thought, this is a very special teaching. So she called all the other queens and she said, we also want to know that. Now, please tell us what you got there. So what was the first thing when she said that? When she started teaching, she agreed on teaching. But can you teach the queens easily as a servant? Have you ever tried teaching your parents? Have you ever tried teaching your boss at work? It's not easy, no? So she said, okay, I can teach, but I will have to sit on the high seat. And you have to pay respect and even do anjali. Not to me, but to the fact that I'm teaching the Dhamma of the Buddha. Because a Sotapanna also has this tremendous respect and total faith, and unshakable faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Anyway, the queen, they agreed to that, and all these queens would be sitting around her on the floor, respecting her, and she would teach the Dhamma. And then every day, because she was free as the only one, she would go and she would listen to the Buddha, and then she would go back into the palace and repeat it all to the queens. And that is actually still collected. It's one of the collections in the Tipitaka, in the Sutta Pitaka. Do you know that one? Anyone? No one knows it. It's the Itivuttaka. And the name of the collection comes because she didn't say Evang me sutang. You know that all the suttas usually start Evang me sutang, thus have I heard. Why do they start like this? Well, that's Venerable Ananda, because he remembers what he heard, but she had a slightly different formula. And from that it's called Itivuttaka, from the way she was expressing it. So it's very unusual that one book in the Sutta Pitaka, in the Khuddaka Nikaya, is actually the collection of the suttas that she had heard. She's a very special person. That is the reason that she became the role model for female lay disciples, because she became an anagami in this way, and she also succeeded in teaching so efficiently that in this whole harem, Queen Samavati and her 500 attendants all were at least stream enterers in the end. She was an incredibly efficient teacher. In any case, so this whole group of women became devout devotees of the Buddha, and Marganya tried all kinds of intrigues to convince the king that they are physically interested in the Buddha, centrally interested. After they were stream enterers, she once suggested to the king, if she really loves you, ask her to prepare one of your favorite foods, a pheasant. Ask her to do that personally. And then she arranged it that Samavati got this live pheasant, which she was now supposed to prepare for the king. And of course, she wouldn't kill. And then the king was upset. And there was all this ploy of Margandya, but once she explained the reasons, he understood it and he calmed down again. But at some occasion, Margandya was actually almost successful. He was constantly whispering to the king and giving him ideas that Samavati is only pretending to love him and is having evil intentions and is actually really interested only in the Buddha and not in the king. And one day she managed to smuggle a poisonous snake into Margandya's womb, into Samavati's womb. And it was just the day when the king would stay at Samavati's chambers. So when she was, I think, making music for him, suddenly this snake came out and was close to attacking the king. And because Margandya had always warned him, he thought, this shows now that she really hates me and she wants to kill me. And he flew in a rage. And the next weapon he could grab was actually a bow. It was actually considered one of the most deadly weapons in ancient India. And they had very skillful, trained archers. Now, the bow is higher than man's length. And they could shoot and kill over a large distance. And so the fully trained Khattiya warrior king, in his fit of rage, grabbed this bow and aimed at Samavati. And what did Samavati do? As a stream enterer and as a foremost Metta practitioner? Can you imagine the situation? Someone standing there with a war bow aiming the arrow wide at your heart in a complete rage, full of hatred and anger. What did she do? Trying to run away, screaming. She radiated loving kindness. Even to the king who was trying to kill her own husband trying to kill her, but all she did, and it's just like suffusing the king with loving kindness. And taking that as an object, first through the king, then she would suffuse the whole world, all beings, with a heart free from ill will, free from hatred, suffused with sympathy, concerned for the benefit even of that person who tries to kill her. And as an advanced practitioner, her loving kindness would have the strength of full samadhi. She would be able to settle down in metta samadhi even in this extreme situation. So the king shot at her, and what happened? The arrow did not penetrate. The arrow couldn't harm her. This is actually one of the other benefits of loving kindness when it has been developed much, when it has been made a vehicle, when it has been established as a firm basis, when it has been completed and consummated, that weapons, fire and poison cannot harm you. Before you try that, make sure that you really have very deep loving kindness. And maybe better not trying it. But maybe your spouse has never shot an arrow at you. I doubt we have any person here who has experienced the spouse shooting an arrow. But maybe your spouse has shot the arrow of pointed words at you. Has that happened? This is much less than shooting a real war arrow from a war bow. But how have you responded? Samavati could respond with loving kindness, even when it was a real arrow. What is your response if someone is just shooting the arrow of sharp words with their tongue at you? Do you respond like that, just loving kindness? So I think there's also a beautiful metaphorical teaching. Now this is an extreme dramatic story of married life in ancient India. But even nowadays, spouses sometimes like to shoot arrows at each other, and sometimes also the wife to the man, sometimes the man to the wife. But we can use that teaching. When the arrows of harsh words come, we remember Samavati as our role model to answer that aggression, to answer that rage with loving kindness. She had heard many of the teachings of the Buddha, and the Buddha was uncompromising when he was teaching loving kindness. Some of the most extreme similes were actually spoken in that context. Do you know one of the famous teachings of the Buddha on loving kindness? An extreme situation where he said, even then, in this extreme situation, if you have any anger arising in your heart, you're not following my teaching. You know the Kakachupama Sutta? Kakachupama, the simile of the saw. The Buddha said, even if murderers, gangsters, cut off with an iron saw, limb after limb, they cut your body into pieces. Even then, if at that extreme situation there is anger rising in our heart, we are not really following the Buddha's teaching. Why did the Buddha give this extreme simile? Was it really meant for people in that situation? Do you know many people personally who had that happening? That someone was sawing off their arms and legs? They have a look at that sutta. In what context was it actually spoken? Did the Buddha give this teaching to someone who was attacked and murdered? That teaching was actually, I can't do these questions anymore because I immediately Google and can do all the answers. That teaching was actually given to a monk who got upset because, in that case, it was actually nuns he was very close to and fond of were criticized. So this extreme teaching was given to someone who got very upset simply because of words. He didn't experience any of these extreme things. But what the Buddha wants to make sure that we have no excuse for anger whatsoever. Because one problem with anger is what is called righteous indignation. You know the term righteous indignation? You feel that someone else is really wrong. For example, they're breaking the precepts, or they're doing things which are exactly, in your opinion at least, against the teaching of the Buddha, maybe even against the laws of the country. They seem to be wrong according to all standards you can imagine. And then there's a tendency in our mind that we think, in this case, we should probably be angry. And sometimes some people even teach that because they like to make people angry. And my understanding of this extreme simile is the Buddha wanted to close up that loophole. Now, whatever people do, however wrong they are, however much they act against the Dhamma, however much harm they may be doing to you or your loved ones or to the sasana or whatever, anger is always wrong. Anger is always wrong. It doesn't mean that we agree with the people who are cutting others into pieces. It doesn't mean we condone their action. We can disagree. Disagreement is something else than anger. But the emotion of anger, the Buddha wanted to make sure that it's absolutely clear in our own heart that this is not the teaching of the Buddha, whatever the situation, however extreme. But usually it doesn't take murderers, usually it just takes words. What is happening when people speak? Their vocal cords are vibrating, the molecules in the air start vibrating, the sound waves are spreading, they go into your ear. There's a little bit of skin called the tympanic membrane, the eardrum, and there's a tiny vibration in the eardrum. That is all that is actually physically happening when people say things which you don't like to hear. Your tiny little piece of skin in the eardrum is vibrating according to a certain pattern. And that is detected, it goes into your brain, it goes into your mind, and we make a really big thing out of it. In this sutta, the Buddha said there are 5 ways people can speak to you. What are the 5 ways anyone can address you? First of all, they can speak at the right time or at the wrong time. For example, they can talk to you when you're just relaxed, when you're quite open, and it's a harmonious atmosphere. It's easy to talk to you. They can also talk to you when you come back from work. You have missed lunch because you're working so hard. You're hoping to have dinner. You had a very bad day already. You've got a headache. And in 5 days you have an important examination. You're completely stressed out and they speak to you. There's a wrong time. Either can happen. People can speak to you at the right time or at the wrong time. Number 2, people can speak to you truthfully or contrary to fact. People may accuse you that you have done something which you actually did do. People may also accuse you that you have done something which you actually did not do. People may say things which are true, which are factual. People may say things which are false, which are complete nonsense, which are just invented. Both forms of speech are possible. So when they do that, you just recognize. Sometimes they say something which is not factual, not according to truth, but at the right time. Sometimes they say something at the wrong time, but it is actually truthful. Any combination possible. And number 3, people can talk to you very friendly, polite, gentle, or they can talk to you very harsh. They may insult you, they may verbally abuse you with 4-letter words, with insults. Both options are there. So if someone is insulting you, you just recognize, this person is speaking maybe at the right time, it may be quite factual, it's true, but he is saying it very harshly. So we just recognize that. The people can speak to you concerned with the meaning, with your benefit, with your welfare, concerned with the Dhamma, or they can speak to you and it has no particular purpose. It's not connected with the Dhamma or your welfare. We can just recognize that. And lastly, people can talk to you coming from a motivation of kindness. They speak to you with a heart of loving kindness, or they speak to you because they're angry, with a heart full of anger and hatred. Each is possible. So these are the 5 ways of speech. And whenever someone speaks to us, we can practice mindfulness and just recognize it. No need to get upset, to get worked up, you just recognize. Sometimes it can happen that someone talks to you at the wrong time, contrary to fact, with very harsh language, not connected with your benefit and welfare or the Dhamma, and coming from anger and hatred. So we just recognize that. And then the Buddha recommended, even if they talk like that, the first thing, may my own mind not change, may my own mind not be affected, may my heart not get carried away from that. Whatever form of speech they're using on us, may we just remember, first of all, may my own heart not get overwhelmed by that. May I not get excited, upset. Second, may I utter no evil words. And that's the next thing the Buddha recommended in that situation. First, trying to protect one's own heart from the strong emotions coming up. And that's always the number 1 almost in any situation, protecting one's own heart, whatever they say. And secondly, not to utter harsh words back, not to say anything bad, not to say anything aggressive. Instead, we should remain sympathetic to that person. We should establish empathy. And we should not have any anger or hatred in our mind, but suffuse that very person who is speaking with a heart imbued with loving kindness. And then, taking this as a basis, we radiate loving kindness to the whole world, to all beings, freed from anger and ill will, with a mind which is gone to greatness, with a mind which is exalted, abundant, immeasurable, freed from hostility and freed from ill will. The Buddha gives beautiful similes for that. Even his own son, he was teaching like that. And he told his little son Vahula, make your mind like the great earth, this whole planet Earth. People walk on the earth, people spit on the earth, people urinate on the earth, people defecate on the earth. Have you ever heard the earth complaining? Have you ever heard the earth changing because people do that? No. Whatever happens to the great earth, it just remains equanimous. It's not carried away, it doesn't change. And the Buddha gave the simile to this monk, Molya Paguna. He said, imagine someone coming with a spade and a wheelbarrow and a bucket, and he starts digging here, and he starts digging there, and putting some earth here and putting it over there, and he tries to make this great earth earthless. Can you do that with this planet Earth? To dig it all away with a spade and a wheelbarrow? Even if you're a very proficient gardener? Even if you go to the gym every day to be strong? Can you do that? Whatever this man is doing there, he will only reap exhaustion and weariment. He can't make the earth earthless. And the Buddha recommended the same with our mind. And the mind should be like the great earth, full of loving kindness. Whatever they do, they're just wearing themselves out. They can't challenge our loving kindness. And he gave the simile of the sky. With someone coming, having some paint and a brush, and now he's going to paint the sky red and green. Can you do that with the sky? Can you paint it red and green with a brush and color? No. And so I said our mind should be just like the open sky. Open, wide like the sky. Whatever they do, whatever color they try to paint you, the colors are simile for all these emotions. Red like anger, or red like love, yellow like envy, black like depression. Whatever they do, our mind doesn't have these emotional responses. It's like the wide open sky, unestablished, immeasurable, boundless. The states of the Brahma Viharas, like loving kindness, they're called Apamanya Vihara, the boundless, limitless, unrestricted. And once you establish that in your heart, whatever they do. The Buddha gave the simile of a cat skin, and a really well-prepared cat skin, so soft. Have you ever had one of these plastic bags who make these unpleasant noises? Maybe you put the drink in the plastic bag when you go to the Dhamma talk, and then you take it out. They're all looking, and it makes these crackling sounds and rustling sounds. The Buddha said this is not how our mind should be. Even if they touch you just a little bit, all kinds of sounds. But can you imagine this cat skin, really well prepared, so soft? Even if you take a piece of shirt or some hard object, some metal object, can you make this cat skin rustle and crackle? No. And so this is how soft our mind should be, how malleable, how pliable. And whatever they do with us, however they move us, whatever words they speak, the mind should maintain this softness, this gentleness. There are countless benefits of loving kindness. How do you wake up in the morning? Do you usually have a beautiful smile when the alarm clock goes? Have you ever done a selfie immediately after the alarm clock? Give it a try. Because one of the benefits of loving kindness is that you wake up happily. Do you wake up happily with a smile on your face? If not, maybe there's still potential to deepen your loving kindness. And you fall asleep happily, easily. Do you sometimes suffer from not being able to fall asleep? Sleeplessness? Do you sometimes have disturbing dreams, even nightmares? Now, these are the first three benefits of loving kindness, if it's really developed to greatness, to limitlessness. And you fall asleep easily, happily. You have a very deep, undisturbed, restful sleep without bad dreams. And in the morning you wake up rested, joyful, happy. You can face the day. And if we contemplate like that, if we really make an effort to develop these qualities, if we make much of loving kindness, if we really have it non-judgmental, unconditional, if we make that quality in a boundless, limitless, unrestricted in our heart, to absolutely everyone without distinction, we will be dear to human beings. You will be popular. I don't think you become popular because of your degrees, because of your designer wear or your expensive car or your jewelry. We are often motivated by trying to make people like us. But look at the people you really like. Is it the one with the expensive jewelry or the big car? There's rather jealousy. If we really want people being fond of us, the best is loving kindness. Same with animals. You may notice that. That is often the first result one can notice. The cat likes to come to sit on your lap and purrs happily, even if you're a newcomer in that place. The dog comes, animals can pick it up usually first. That is a quality of loving kindness. You don't have to be afraid of evil spirits. They don't even come close to you. You're dear to non-human beings. The devas will protect you. And if you really push it to deep samadhi on loving kindness, then you will be protected even from poison, fire, weapons, just like Samavati. Another advantage is that the mind will quickly attain samadhi. When you sit down to meditate, does your heart usually drop into deep samadhi quickly? After 5 minutes, you're just blissed out in samadhi when you sit down. If you like it quicker, loving kindness is the way to go. Tuvatang chittang samadhiyati. The mind quickly attains samadhi. If you don't develop wisdom, you will go to the Brahmaloka when you die. If you additionally develop wisdom, then of course you will have the noble attainments. But even with loving kindness alone, you will be reborn in Brahmaloka, and you will be dying undisturbed. Your mind is at ease even at the time of death from the power of loving kindness. So we should reflect on these beautiful similes the Buddha gave us. The mind like a whole planet Earth. Whatever they dig, whether they throw garbage onto the earth, our heart remains just like the great earth, unmoved, unshaken. Another simile is the river Ganges, or here in Singapore maybe rather the Strait of Malacca, the ocean. If I take a torch and I go to the beach, and now I want to use this torch to dry out the ocean, will I succeed with that? Can I use a torch? I mean, this is a torch in the old sense, with burning fire. And now I dry out the ocean. Is that possible? No, it's impossible, of course. And so similar, our mind should be like the great ocean. And whatever fire they try to put in there, even if they throw some torches into that, it will not lead to that great ocean being evaporated. It will be to that fire being extinguished. If you're into the fire element, the Buddha advised his own son, the fire burns anything. The fire burns pure things, it burns impure things. The fire even burns corpses, which in ancient India were considered about the most impure thing you can imagine. So similar, we should have that equanimity in our mind like the fire element. So to sum it up, we have these strong similes of the Buddha, not really because he expects us that we can practice that in this extreme situation, which is unlikely to happen anyhow, but because he wants to make it absolutely clear to us in everyday situations, when all we have to face is not being cut to pieces, but just to have there's certain vibrations striking our eardrums. In that kind of situation, that we know that anger is never the right response. That instead the heart should be imbued with loving kindness. Whichever way they speak to us, true or untrue, friendly or hostile, right time or wrong time, it all doesn't matter. We just mindfully notice that. And then the first thing, our mind should not change. There should be no change in our mind. Thank you. You see, even just talking about loving kindness, and they come running and offering you things and looking after you. This is the effect. So the mind shouldn't change. Secondly, I don't utter any evil words. At least I restrain the faculty of speech. Thirdly, I will remain filled with empathy, concerned with the welfare of that person, whatever they say. With a mind free from anger and aversion, with a mind imbued with loving kindness. And then using that person as a basis, from there we should radiate loving kindness throughout the four quarters in all directions, to all beings, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, freed from hostility and freed from ill will, without any limitation, without restriction, unconditional, without any judgment, whether it's to friends or enemies, whether it's to humans or animals, whether it's insects, cockroaches, whether it's ghosts or devas or brahmas, whether it's enlightened arahants or evil sinners, whether it's criminals or saints, absolutely everyone, whether it's aliens, Martians, Venusians, creatures from faraway galaxies, or the loved ones back at home, to everyone. And maybe that is the end of this little Dhamma talk.
So, may we have permission for some questions?
Please, yeah.
Questions? No questions, Ajahn.
What does it mean?
Oh, yes, we do have a question.
Ajahn, thank you very much for the very interesting talk, especially the very detailed explanation of loving kindness. On hearing the story of the Queen of Kosambi, and she has displayed a lot of loving kindness before she came to the Buddha, before she came to the Buddha's teaching. And I'm just wondering whether the quality of a metta or loving kindness, is it the same as what we learn through the Buddha's teaching? In other words, I may be just looking at things black and white. Is that like a Buddhist metta and a non-Buddhist metta? Thank you. Your views, please.
I would say the quality of loving kindness is fairly independent of the Buddha's teaching, and you can find it even outside. The Buddha usually describes that practice of the 4 Brahma Viharas as a way leading to rebirth with Mahabrahma. So thanks for that question. I should add that loving kindness wouldn't be a complete practice. If you practice only loving kindness and nothing else, you will be reborn as a Brahma, but you will not have the noble attainments. So at some stage, loving kindness has to be supplemented with some form of wisdom and insight practice. And loving kindness is a classic samatha object. So you can attain jhana, you can attain samadhi, you can attain rebirth in these realms. But loving kindness in and by itself will not lead to the noble attainments. However, if you really have loving kindness to that level, and you have jhana and samadhi with loving kindness, and you already have faith in the Buddha's teaching, and you know some meditation objects which can give you insight, and then you turn your mind to that, it shouldn't be too difficult to do it. But you can't always have everything in one talk. Today I just wanted to emphasize this quality. It's certainly a very helpful one. But it belongs more into the area what we would call a samatha practice. But you can see that some of the similes also have the wisdom approach. What the Buddha told to his son, for example, that was more on equanimity, reflecting equanimously, making the mind like the great earth, not responding. There was also the aspect of mindfulness, analyzing the different forms of speech, how people can talk to you. But certainly this talk today didn't emphasize wisdom and insight, but it emphasized loving kindness. Now that is a quality which generates harmony, which generates concord. And it is the only way for overcoming anger. The famous Dhammapada, we can never overcome anger by anger. Only through non-anger can anger be defeated. And that is an eternal law, and that is lasting. But thank you for pointing that out. Loving kindness in itself wouldn't lead you to the noble attainments. It wouldn't lead you to comprehending the Four Noble Truths. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't practice it. It just means we should practice it a lot, but also do some insight meditation as well.
Okay, thank you, Ajahn. I would think that most of us here, not all, would aspire to the kind of level of metta that you have mentioned, and Buddha not. However, I can only speak as a very junior practitioner of the Dhamma. While I aspire for that, I fall far short in life because struggling with other things. And sometimes, so if somebody in our life keeps coming at us with demands and we try to accommodate, but over a period of time, like a counselor said, you need to draw a boundary in order to protect myself as well, to have metta for myself, that this is beyond my threshold. And so if you were sharing this in an attempt to skillfully with somebody else, but that is provided that the counterparty is a person who is reasonable and open, but there are some people who have so much anger and view the world at large as a battlefield, everybody and the world. In the sense they are not reasonable. You can't really talk things out with them. Whatever you do is interpreted as bad in a way. So how...
Be careful before you classify someone like that.
Okay.
Be careful.
All right.
How do you know that they're totally unreasonable? But I get your point.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is this person holds an opinion about, makes a decision and foists it on the rest of the family members, even when the rest of the family living under the same roof do not want this. But this person will insist over what all the rest of the people want when they express it.
We have to distinguish very clearly two different things. One is the attitude of loving kindness in your heart. A totally different thing is agreeing or condoning or following what people tell you. Having loving kindness doesn't mean that you agree with everyone. In fact, sometimes you should disagree. For example, if someone is really cutting off another person into pieces, We can have loving kindness, but you would never agree with that. You're absolutely sure that this should not be done. And if someone else asks you to do that, you would never do it. So you can disagree, and you can also act contrary to what people tell you or what they want you to do. But the important point is that you shouldn't do that out of a motivation of anger or hatred. So if you want to do something which is good and wholesome, maybe there's some conflict and someone doesn't like Buddhism and they don't want you to meditate, and they get very angry with you and they yell at you and they tell you, you shouldn't meditate, this is all nonsense, blah, blah, blah. So the first thing is that you shouldn't get angry. You recognize my heart shouldn't change. You don't have to say anything bad back, but it's nowhere written that you should stop meditating then. You continue meditating, of course, but without anger against them.
All right, and
it doesn't mean you have to comply. Loving kindness doesn't mean that they can walk all over you.
Okay.
And the amazing thing is that some of these great Ajahns have tremendous loving kindness. You don't see people walking all over them anyhow.
All right, so what I'm asking is, so somebody has a demand on me to act in a certain way, and sometimes I do not think is the appropriate action, so I don't. At other times, I'm not able to, at that particular, I don't have the capacity for it. And so when I don't comply, this person gets angry.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So
yeah.
You cannot live your life without making other people angry or upset in some way, particularly if you really want to do something good and wholesome. People got angry at the Buddha.
So then when
people
they get
got angry at Ajahn
that's
Chah.
Separate of me. All I can do is have metta for that person, but
very important is your motivation. So you don't do this action only to make them angry. Of course, some people are also not nice. And they know that the person is maybe, could you please stop banging the door so loudly? And the next thing I do is I bang it even louder because I want to make them angry. That should not be your motivation.
Then maybe in another example, then maybe you're in a relationship with somebody, and this is a common relationship in the world, and there's something about this person which is very different from my own values, and I find that I cannot accept it. I try as much as possible to have a bigness of mind and to be kind and to be embracing of this person. It's not evil. It's just very different, the life value, and I can't accept it. So I need to end the relationship. So this inability to embrace, is that considered not having loving kindness? Just your perspective.
You see, I can't really answer that for you, I'm afraid. You have to work that out. Loving kindness doesn't mean that you have to embrace everything. Loving kindness means that you never have the motivation of anger and hatred in your heart. But sometimes you don't embrace it. It doesn't mean you have to embrace everything. In particular, if it is unwholesome, you don't want to embrace it. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by embracing, but to get that point across very clearly, that to have loving kindness doesn't mean that you agree with everyone. That will not work anyhow, because one person may want you to do this, the other person wants you to do the opposite. So how can you please everyone? You can't please everyone. That is not the aim of your life, that you please everyone. But you're never doing anything with the deliberate intention of displeasing them. You never come from the motivation of anger. But sometimes you disagree. But when you disagree, make always sure in your heart that you do that without that anger in your heart. Make sure that the reason you disagree is for reasons of Dhamma, not because you dislike that person. Sometimes you have a situation, someone dislikes you, and whatever you say, they will disagree. And the only reason is not that they have a dislike. That is not the point. But if you have a good reason to disagree, and say someone is very obviously breaking the 5 precepts and maybe wants you to join that, obviously you don't join. And you can even openly, depending on the situation, you can even explain why you disagree, and you say it. But while you're doing that, the crucial point is make sure that you don't have the anger. The disagreeing without the anger, that's the important one. And then the disagreement usually doesn't trigger so much conflict. Because people are, even if they're not Dhamma practitioners or great meditators, most people have this intuition. They can pick up what is the reason that this person is speaking like this. They come from anger. You usually can notice that. This is the reason that someone like Ajahn, he could criticize people sometimes very severely. He would say he would torture people to train them. But people could notice that there's no anger. So even if he did something which was really tough for them, they were able to take it because there was absolutely no anger. Ajahn Chah was just concerned about their welfare. So the trick is to disagree with people, but at the same time you're really concerned about their welfare. You still have empathy for them. You can still see their position. And most importantly, you're not disagreeing out of anger or aversion. You're disagreeing for some very good Dhamma reason, maybe. So these two things have been very clearly told apart. And it certainly, loving kindness doesn't mean that you do everything other people tell you. That's a complete misunderstanding. You do what the Buddha recommends, not what just any person comes and wants you to do. But if you don't do what they want you to do, then make sure that you don't have this anger, aversion in your heart.
All right. Any more final questions? Oh.
Okay, thanks Ajahn for the talk about this loving kindness and all that. So I think I want to touch more about loving kindness and how we deal in our daily life. So, like in this world, like in Singapore, it's very clear that if I can say that if we are sometimes bitten by insect, like it's a mosquito, and we know that in our society here, we have this dengue fever and all, which was transmitted by this insect. So we understand also our teaching in the Buddha teaching that we should express our loving kindness, and of course the first precept is panatipata, to prevent from killing. So if in a circumstances that a lot of insect and biting us, and in our mind that whether this is a dengue associated mosquito or not, are we allowed to, like, so sorry to say, press our hand there and kill the mosquito? One thing there, and because we also learn, we know that we should implement the loving kindness with understanding, with wisdom. We need to take care of our body or how. Having said that, I also want to share that we understand that in our Buddha previous life, we ever heard of a story in Jataka that at one time when in the previous life he was a prince, went to the forest, went for hunting, and at one time he saw there's some small tigers who are very hungry, so he sacrificed himself, he fell down and let the tigers eat himself. So of this kind of metta, loving kindness, but in one way we are taught to implement a wisdom, not a blind loving kindness. So how do Ajahn balance this? And about the mosquito just now I say, but yeah. Thank you.
I think no one would demand from you that you should throw yourself to the tigers. So rest at ease there, that is not required. I would recommend you not to follow so much the Jataka teachings, but the teaching the Buddha gave after he attained Sammasambodhi. It is stated that from the night of Sammasambodhi under the Bodhi tree until the night of Parinibbana, whatever the Tathagata expounds, declares and teaches is just so. This is why he's a Tathagata. You can totally rely and trust on that. From the time of enlightenment to the time of Parinibbana. Not what he did 1,000,000 lifetimes before. That is not so much the guide. So don't worry, no one will demand that as a good Buddhist you should throw yourself to the tigers to feed them. When it comes to the mosquito, I have a feeling you know the answer anyhow. You know the answer. Now just imagine if you go to the Buddha and ask him, should I kill this possibly dengue-carrying mosquito? What would the Buddha tell you? You think the Buddha would tell you? What is your guess?
The first thing maybe we don't kill itself, we just wave our hand to keep it away from our body. But if we come back again,
sounds very wise. Yes.
But come back again, we have no choice. Maybe we can press it, but our mind is very clear. But there's a different mind. The mind is not full of anger. The mind is not full of, I want to kill you. No, but so sorry, in our mind, I have to protect myself. May you be well, happy later, but I have to kill you. So sorry. But so there's a clear mind, clear loving kindness mind, but not the mind of anger, want to get rid of this inside.
Fortunately, even if we don't have much wisdom or anything in that area, we have extremely clear guidelines. There's very, very clear guidelines, and you don't even have to agonize what to do. The first precept is that we do not intentionally kill. It's very easy. No need to discuss. No need to go into any great details. It's an absolutely clear, 100% unambiguous guideline. You do never intentionally kill. Very clear cut. Nothing needs more talking about it. This is an unambiguous, 100% clear guideline. There's not a single situation, to the best of my knowledge, where the Buddha ever encouraged, condoned, or recommended killing under any circumstance, for whatever motive, from whatever motivation, in any way at all. This is a precept. You have a super clear guideline in your life, absolutely. And it's your decision to follow that precept or not. Now that is the freedom you have. You can say, okay, in this situation I don't follow the teaching of the Buddha and I rather kill the mosquito. But if you do that, it's good that you clear in your mind, then you're not following the teaching of the Buddha. He has never recommended that. He's not forcing you to anything. And in the end, it's up to you. It's your karma. It's your decisions. But the first precept is unconditional and unambiguous. There's not a single situation where the Buddha ever recommended intentional killing. And I think it's very important not to, muddle your mindfulness in terms of motivations. You cannot kill that mosquito out of loving kindness. That if you feel like that, it indicates there's a weakness in sati sampajanya. When you deliberately kill a mosquito, your mind will not be suffused with loving kindness. In that case, then you would also have delusion coming in. That would be making things even more problematic. In the end, it's better if someone kills and at least they know they're doing something against the precepts and they understand it's unskillful and unwholesome. But to do the killing and at the same time to find some excuse that this is somehow in line with the Dhamma, or this is actually loving kindness, then you're doing the killing and on top of it you have delusion as well. And then the problem is even bigger. You cannot kill out of loving kindness. It doesn't work. Okay. I hope are you okay with that answer? But I feel this one is so unambiguous. I have to answer that unambiguously. Because it's not just about dengue carrying mosquitoes, it's about war and nuclear war. And once you go down that track, we have all these nuclear weapons worldwide. And once the first precept starts breaking down, we're in big trouble. So I would always try to really defend that. There's some reason that this is precept number 1. It is important. And I would always defend that precept. And with all of loving kindness, if people don't like when I say this is unambiguous in any situation, I will still say it. Not in order to upset you, but just this is the teaching of the Buddha. We have to say that. And a particular dangerous is if you break precepts and then find an excuse. It's much better to say, okay, in this situation I was lying, and lying is against the precepts. That's also an unambiguous one. There are no white lies or anything like that. If we lie for whatever motivation, intentionally and deliberately, we are breaking that precept. And it's much better than to acknowledge it, rather than finding some excuse that in this situation I'm not really breaking the precepts, I'm just practicing loving kindness and compassion, and I lie and I kill and I steal and so on. It's just out of loving kindness and compassion. That is even more dangerous then. I'm glad you can take that answer and even nodding. Thanks for that.
So, Ajahn, there's one more last question here. That's right. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn, for your talk. So, as a junior practitioner of Buddhism and the Dharma, my question is kind of off topic. It's not on love and kindness. It's more of on how to gain connection to my aspirations as opposed to my desires. So, the first thing is how to gain connection to my aspirations, and the next thing would be how to separate these two, as they are usually confused to be.
I didn't fully get it. What to do with your aspirations?
How to find out what your aspirations are, and not to follow my desires.
What kind of aspiration to form?
Yeah.
You don't have an aspiration yet, but you want to know what kind of aspiration should I develop?
Yeah. And how I can sort of deviate away from my desires that will lead to suffering.
Now that sounds like a great aspiration to start with. May I be able to move away from my desires, to weaken my desires, in order to weaken my suffering. That sounds like you already answered your question in your own statement. Now that is a very great aspiration, it's a very wholesome, beneficial one. They may be able to overcome, or at least to weaken my desires, so that I can overcome or at least weaken my suffering. That is certainly a very good and wholesome aspiration, yeah.
Okay, but because the reason is I constantly follow my desires nonetheless. Otherwise, I feel like I have nothing to live for. Is what I feel that I'm living for on a daily basis. It seems to be with accordance to my desires. So I would like to work towards something, but not towards my desires. Towards what I read was to work towards my aspirations, and how I've read that to learn what your aspirations are, you do it through meditation or through reading on Buddha's teachings, and I'm still in progress of doing that. So I just like to ask about your opinion on how I can further myself in the area.
Now already I have to praise you for your insight. It is a very honest statement you make in public, that it seems that you're constantly following your desires. And many people in their whole life, they never reach that insight even. Even if you tell them that what they're doing all their life is trying to follow their desires, they may even deny it. So you already had a very valuable and crucial insight. And it looks like you have already noticed that just following one's desire doesn't really lead to happiness and contentment and peace. But it sounded like you have already noticed that following one's desire enmeshes and leads one further into suffering. So first of all, my anumodana and appreciation of that you had that insight and that you say that so honestly and open. And that is already an excellent start. And in order to form aspirations, it is very good to meditate. But in the beginning stages, our wisdom is still limited, our insight is limited. So you may want to use the pointers of the Buddha, the teaching of the Buddha, to form your aspirations. And a very good one is, for example, simply to practice generosity. There's a very simple start, dana, giving, sharing, because it goes against the basic desire of being egoistic, of getting things for me, of accumulating, of having more. Each time, any little act of generosity is already going against that. So a very basic aspiration is, may I develop the quality of generosity? And then you can refine that, and you can say, maybe I want to dedicate every month that percentage of my income, or I want to do that many hours of service every week. If you want to define the aspirations more in detail. Another aspiration is keeping the 5 precepts. Or if you're new to the whole thing and you feel I'm particularly weak in one of the precepts, and you start with that particular one. Maybe in this year my aspiration is to clear up the 5th precept and to finally go really sober. Within this year, purifying the 5th precept. Just as an example. So in the beginning it can be helpful to simply use the Buddha's teaching for your aspirations, because the own wisdom may not yet be strong enough. Does it help a little bit? Or the generosity precepts, and then you can, for example, form a resolution that every day you want to do at least, say, half an hour formal meditation. Or you can make a resolution that I want to listen to a Dhamma talk at least once a week. These are just some brainstorming some ideas what you can do. Does it help? But it sounds very good what you're saying. Sounds very promising. I think you may experience good progress on your Buddhist path if you can stay with it.
Yes, and I think we said 3 sadhus to your aspiration. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'd like to thank Ajahn for this evening's talk, and perhaps request Ajahn to give us some blessings and some closing.
Okay, yeah. Shall we also do the chant of sharing blessings with all beings?
Yeah.
Okay. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness of my practice, may I soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. In every kind of birth, may I have an upright mind with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble Lord. The Sangha is my supreme support. By the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled. Okay, and we can pay respects to Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami.